Yikes. All right, I'm going to go quick so I don't get kicked off stage. That's not quite right, but my talk is a story about a project that's redesigning education for the 21st century, and in doing so is tackling many important questions, one of which is, what if schools were actually collaborative? So my talk is partly an answer and partly an invitation, as the nature of this project, which we call Agile Learning Centers, is meant to adapt and change and continuously improve over time. So I ask you to consider the question with me and offer some feedback afterwards. As far as education goes, we're living in very strange times. School, as we know, was officially implemented in the United States about 175 years ago by the very first Secretary of Education, Horace Mann. And by 1918, all 48 states had adopted laws requiring children to complete elementary school. And this was a historic shift that began to challenge age-old wisdom as to how people learn. And at the time, schools were being designed like 20th century schools are being designed like 20th century factories, intending to produce a workforce that could meet the needs of the industrial economy of that time. And since then, modern advances in technology have produced exponential change in virtually every area of our lives except education. So here's a quote by Dr. Tony Wagner, who's I'm not getting it. This is on a white background. And I don't have it written down. Well, it's a really good quote, and it's about how irrelevant schools are these days. Because should I wing it or? There you go. It goes something like this. Tony's the expert in residence at the Harvard Innovation Lab and author of the Global Achievement Gap and the book called Global Achievement Gap and Creating Innovators. Tony says, because knowledge is available on every internet-connected device, what you know matters far less than what you can do with what you know. The capacity to innovate, the ability to solve problems creatively, or bring new possibilities to life, and skills like critical thinking, communication, and collaboration are far more important than academic knowledge. So here in 2014, we're hearing a lot about autonomy and creativity and collaboration as some of the most essential things needed for addressing the biggest problems we face as a society. And the social sciences are confirming over and over and over again that cultivating these abilities actually leads to happier and healthier humans. So I think it's safe to assume that in order to teach collaboration, the educational experience needs to be itself collaborative. So before we try to design an education that's collaborative, we should probably make sure we understand what the word means. I'm going to need help here. I got a quote again. Give me a blue background or something. It's actually the definition of collaborate. So to collaborate is to work jointly on an activity, especially to produce or create something, and synonyms and related words are cooperate, join forces, work together, co-produce, agreed upon, and mutual. So again, a collaborative environment implies that the participants have autonomy and agency, and that through the process they're creating and learning to be creative. In a truly collaborative environment, we would recognize that anyone could be a teacher and that we're all students of life, not confined by the walls of a school or by artificial social roles. And this is the fundamental problem with our prevailing education system, because it cannot and will not teach collaboration as long as the teacher-student relationship is based on contention. Education's broken because it fails to recognize the need for consent as a foundation for any healthy relationship. Without consent, you can't have co-creativity or partnership or any amount of sustained, meaningful engagement. Adults in a truly collaborative school would act from this understanding and design from this awareness. So what happens then if we get rid of the idea of a monolithic teacher? What becomes of the adults? What are we used for? One more time. Hopefully only one more time. adults in an Agile Learning Center become facilitators of the learning environment, which means that they're primarily focused on bringing about an outcome, such as learning productivity or communication, by providing indirect or unobtrusive assistance, guidance, or supervision. So once we recognized the need to have consent to build a collaborative relationship with children, we'd stop asking questions like, how can I get them to pay attention and listen? Or what tricks can I use to get them to remember this information for a couple of days? Or how can I create the appearance of learning so that we and the administration feel a little bit better about how we're spending our time? And we'd start asking questions like, what do you want to do, learn, create, explore, try for the first time? And what are your intentions, goals, passions, visions for yourself? What support do you need from me or your peers to make those things a reality? Agile learning facilitators are borrowing, inventing, adapting, and iterating all kinds of tools and practices to support young people without getting in their way. Every day at an Agile Learning Center, kids are practicing prioritizing their time, declaring their intentions, making their work visible, and engaging in their own personal process. One of the lean structures that we use at an ALC is called Set the Week, which is a short meeting on a Monday morning to plan and sketch out our week. Through Set the Week, we're able to invite parents and volunteers from the local community into the school to share their passions and skills with us. So this is just one of the ways, or a few of the ways, that we've been able to create a collaborative environment for our students and for our families. But what about for the facilitators? Doing this work alone is pretty much impossible, especially considering there's no degree or training manual that's going to have the right answers. After immersing myself in the world of alternative education for about 5 or 6 years, I was able to see that there's a lot of schools, small schools around the world that are collaborating really well within their communities, but that collaboration was seriously lacking at all other levels. It made me think, what if the people who are creating and holding these spaces were collaborating too? And then I realized that for our tools and practices to remain relevant over time and to build critical mass for these ideas, this was going to have to be the case. So we started a meetup group in New York City in the fall of 2013 to begin sharing our vision and some of our tools and practices with other educators and social entrepreneurs. By the spring, we had a partner school and a couple ALC startups forming. This past summer, we held our very first Agile Learning Facilitator Intensive as a way of training ourselves through deep collaboration and intentional culture creation. Together, we embodied an ALC for 3 weeks. We used and evolved our tools, and we worked out a bunch of projects together. We've continued our collaboration throughout the year with weekly calls where we check in on what's happening at our local ALCs and share best practices, and a couple weekend meetups where we get together and play and continue to improve our craft. Now, instead of a bunch of small, isolated groups of passionate people fighting against the prevailing system, we're a thriving, growing, connected, autonomous network. But the collaboration can't stop there. To be truly relevant in 2014, you've got to be using digital tools for collaboration. This is the world we live in, and it's definitely the world that young people are growing up into. So what if there was an online social learning network that existed to support the growth and strength of smaller, local, physical learning communities? We're really excited to have launched the first iteration of that vision this past fall on agilelearningcenters.org. So now every student and facilitator in the network has their own blog and website, and there's an activity stream where we can share links and articles and discussion forums where network-wide conversations can take shape and knowledge can be shared. So to build a collaborative world, we definitely need to have collaborative businesses and organizations. But to build a collaborative world, we're going to have to design schools that are actually collaborative, which means always having consent and learning to work with children rather than on them. Thanks.